My name is Solana Chetman, and I am the Director of Civic Programs here at The Shed and the organizer of Up Close, our series of digital commissions born in April 2019 as a virtual platform for both artist creativity and audiences catharsis in the midst of COVID-19. Welcome to a conversation between Madeline Hollander and David Hallberg in conjunction with the powerful piece 52 Last Vows, created by Madeline and featuring David. I will start by quickly sharing a few of the points of access that we are providing today. In the bottom right of your Zoom window, you'll find a button that says Live Transcript, where you can find real-time captions provided by Kathy Cordipass. To access CART live closed captioning, click on the closed caption button. We also have American Sign Language interpretation provided by Ashley Rodriguez and Naomi Miller, who will be pinned by our team and therefore should be visible to you at all times. And we want the conversation to be fully enjoyable for everyone. So please, at any point, use the Q&A button to share any extra accommodation needs. And that will also be your best way to share any questions for the panelists as they arise, and we'll bring those into the room towards the end of the conversation. I also want to thank a number of our supporters who made Up Close and tonight's conversation possible. M&T Bank and New York City Department of Cultural Affairs have all provided generous support, as well as our own Lisi and Jonathan Tisch Commissioning Fund and the Shed Commissioners. I also want to thank the Howard Gilman Foundation for providing the Zoom platform that we will be using tonight for this conversation. The Shed's relationship with Madeline is long-standing, as she was one of the artists selected originally as part of Open Call in 2018. And we've had the pleasure of working with her and seeing versions of this piece and of this research evolve and transform at every point, both when we thought she would be able to perform a version of it live at the Shed, and then when she immediately found a new context and a new intention and a new vision for it during the pandemic. The piece was filmed at the end of last year, right here at our 8th floor lab, bringing our building alive even before we were even able to open to the public. Giving us hope for art continuing to push us forward. We cannot be more thankful to her creativity, her thrust, and her vision. This digital commission is now, as I was mentioning, part of Up Close, which has become a space for mourning, for joy, for questioning, and for reflection. If you haven't seen the piece yet, I recommend you do so later tonight on our website, as well as check out other artist pieces, including Julia Solomonov, Troy Anthony and Jerome Ellis, Kian Williams, Aisha Jordan, among many, many others. They are truly poignant and a moving diary of the last year and a half. Before I introduce our wonderful speakers, I want to introduce Charles Aubin, Senior Curator and Head of Publications at Performa, who we've invited to co-introduce tonight's conversation precisely on the opening night of Performa. So Charles, I leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Solana. Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation, and thank you all at the Shed for making it happen. Yeah, you're right. It's a very special night for this conversation. It's our telethon. And so it's our online telethon, our Performa telethon, and which will start in an hour at 7 p.m. So I'm not going to be able to stay with you until the end of this event. But it's moving because basically a year ago, at our previous online telethon, we were able to present an earlier version of 52 Final Bows, this wonderful collaboration between Madeline and David. And so it's very exciting to see the final 52 Final Bows work tonight, screened by the Shed. Thank you so much. Maybe just to introduce this conversation, I just want to say that to me, 52 Final Bows is really part of a very moving body of works that Madeline has initiated over the past 2 years since the pandemic shut down. She's been able, you know, in between lockdowns, and she's been able to collaborate and spend some time in the studio with dancers who were not able to perform because of the pandemic shutdown since March 2020, or like with David, to take their final bow. And I'd say that she's found really wonderful ways to examine all these different embodied knowledge, kinesthetic memories, body memories that dancers carry in their own bodies, but that you don't always see, obviously, when you go see a performance, but that they really kept with themselves, even though they were not on the stage over the past year and a half. And I think that in this body of work, she found a very sensible way to make this immaterial reality tangible. And it took different forms, so moving image, like tonight, but also live performance. And so I'd like to put 52 Final Bows in conversation with a piece that Madeline is going to premiere at the end of this month with us at Performa, which is titled Review. And for the occasion, we're bringing 25 dancers from different New York City dance companies. So Martha Graham, Trisha Brown, New York City Ballet, Bill T. Jones, but also Fiddler on the Roof and West Side Story. And through the system of marking and space blocking that dancers usually use in rehearsals, but that again, you're not always able to see, she's bringing them together to perform and to mark all these works that never met an audience, or runs that cut short because of the pandemic shut down. And so, yes, I think that, as you said, Solana, like it's a very sensible way of looking at what, from a personal, from a very individual, from the perspective of the dancer, these past 2 years have done. And I wish that, so we, with Review, we're actually sold out for now. We'll be able to release more tickets in the coming weeks, but we'll be also live streaming the piece on our website. I think that this piece that Madeline did with David a year ago was one of the very deep personal study for this work. And I'm so happy that tonight we'll be able to really go deep into it and discuss it more specifically. And so thank you so much. And I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for being here. And I lastly want to introduce our two amazing speakers who we're so grateful for being here. Just as context, Madeline just had a baby. David is in Australia, so it's tomorrow morning, but Madeline Hollander is an artist who works with performance, video, and installation to explore how human movement and body language negotiate their limits within everyday systems. Her work has been exhibited at the Whitney Museum of American Art, at the Visual Arts Center in the University of Austin, Texas, Serpentine Galleries in the UK, the Centre Pompidou. And David was a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theatre and the Bolshoi Theatre, as well as a principal guest artist with the Royal Ballet and resident guest artist with the Australian Ballet. He is the author of a critically acclaimed memoir, A Body of Work, Dancing to the Edge and Back. And since 2021, he has become the 8th artistic director of the Australian Ballet. So Madeline, David, I'm leaving the floor all to you, and I'll see you later with some questions from the audience. Thank you again so much.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us, and Solana and Charles for the introduction. And David for being here and for partaking in this. And I think probably the best way to begin is just dive into maybe the beginnings or the origin of that piece. And take a look at how it all started and our process a little bit.
Yeah. So, well, you gave birth to it, to be honest. So what was for you? Was it something that was itching for a while about like these final bows, or was I your inspiration?
I would say it
What?
was both, actually.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to kind of collect a database of, introductions or these bows and the different reverences that you would do, that were dependent on who was teaching class or what the character role was. And this was very much tied into the research I was doing for this other piece that was kind of accumulating all these performances that had been shut down or canceled or indefinitely postponed, and talking to so many dancers about these experiences of having, worked so hard and rehearsed so hard for these pieces that, never ended up being on the stage, but they was still very much in their bodies and they were ready to go, and not knowing if it was going to happen next week or the following week or the following year or never. And kind of hearing their stories and what they were missing and learning more about these characters. And for me, this was a way of kind of isolating one element that was very much lacking during this pandemic period, which is the relationship between the audience and the dancer, and this, very intimate and very dynamic energy that you get when you're performing to a live audience and you hear the applause, and looking at, what we're in this drought of an applause, and, in a period where there is no, people were doing performances virtually, but never, to a silent audience, essentially. And that really struck me. And so when, we were given this opportunity to work together, I think it was, knowing your breadth of work and your history and your ability to, you've done so many roles in your careers, so expansive, that it was such a wonderful opportunity to kind of present this as a project to build together.
Ask me that question about trying to think of some bows. We had more than 52, right? How many did we
We had
have?
like 98.
Did we? Yeah.
Yeah.
God. And I just sort of like started to percolate like the bows in not only the bows that I had done, but like the bows that ballerinas had done to the side of me, that choreographers had done, that I did as a school kid, different stylistic bows from different theaters around the world. There were so many, and I think what I realized quickly was, and I guess I always felt like this when I was performing, you're still performing when you're bowing. People think that when the dancing is finished, you're kind of done performing and you're bowing and you're like back to who you are, but you're still performing. And I always felt, honestly, that the performance continued until I was having a beer by myself in my apartment, after stage door, after the bows, after the meet and greets. Like that's when it was done. And so with the bows, it was like, oh my God, there's such a breadth of bows.
Choreography.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, they're all choreographed, and that's you don't really notice that when it's just one bow by itself, but when you put them side by side, back to back, over and over, you see how unique each one is, and how your character will remain that character until the curtain comes down. And so even when all of the bows are essentially stating the same meaning, which is, thank you for your attention, and thanking the audience or thanking the teacher and the orchestra, that thank you is delivered in these different languages based off of where you are, what size theater you're in, what character you just finished, how your performance went. One of my favorites are, your bow after a perfect landing versus your bow after a shitty landing, sorry. And just seeing that in your body, how you embrace that type of gratitude after those, moments of what happens to the ego. or the personal
Totally.
things like spotting your mom in the audience and how that changes that choreography, or catching a rose or passing a rose to your partner.
Yeah. I very rarely saw people in the audience, because the Met is just like this black sea of, and then lights in your eyes. But I did see my parents a couple of times, and my mom's on this chat actually. And I, like, the minute I zoned in, it was like we were connected. And those were always like touching moments to know that you saw someone that you knew in the house. At Bolshoi Theater, they bring the house lights up after like curtain call, 3 or something. So you can very often see the people that have come to see the show or and I always liked that connection with people, because it made it more, actually the character or the role kind of like came down a notch, and like I could just like observe the people in the audience. It was always a beautiful moment.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to say about going back to the character part of it was, while I was watching you go through each of these different roles, and we were brainstorming and creating these lists and really trying to hash out as many different character roles we could, I started to notice that when you would start the bow, I would immediately start seeing the costume, and I would see the lighting, and I'd see the set design, and I'd start to even hear the music that you're, even though there's no music during the bow, like the entire Nutcracker would come flooding in, or that scene from Swan Lake. And it was such a conjuring. It was like a complete transformation. And one of the things that's not in the video, but I feel like, I edited out, but that was very moving for me shooting it and working with you, was seeing you on the side, about to run in to begin the bow, and seeing you kind of gather yourself and know that you're about to turn into that character, whoever it was. Maybe there's a few that you remember doing that you want to talk about, and all of a sudden go from David to this moment where you entered, you just were completely possessed. And then you enter, and that's where you're wearing white shorts, you're barefoot, black backdrop. It was extremely minimal, and yet I would see the cape, and I would see the fan, and I'd see the costume, and all of the aesthetics that surround that role just came to life. And then you'd exit, and they'd kind of evaporate. So that was really powerful for me.
Yeah, it was interesting because like what's filmed is this succession of the bows, and but I would have that moment in the wings, like even during the filming and during shows, where I would, like, I don't know, pick a character, Von Rothbart from Swan Lake, who's the evil kind of guy, and like you'd be in the wings, and then I'd just like turn the gaze on, and like it'd click on. So then when you get on stage, like you are him. He's got this long dramatic, ballet cape, as a lot of men do in the ballet world, that big capes, and it came on stage, and I don't know, it was like there's always that transformation, even like in a character, I think, not just bowing, but a character in general. I think every dancer has that moment where they're in the wings, and it's like the kind of stress, the doubts, all of that are going through your mind. And then it's like, but it's always before you enter the stage. So you see the dancer in the wings, like, become whatever they need to become to get on stage. I mean, I think some of my favorite bows in the filming, I think, well, I was joking around with you that the choreographers that I imitated probably will never speak to me again, i.e. Mark Morris, who I adore and is a genius, and Anna-Therese de Keersmacher, again, who I don't know so well, oops, but is a genius. But I remember so vividly, like, choreographers coming out and taking bows, and I thought that certain ones should be represented. I think it's the greatest form of flattery, imitation, but hey, that's only my humble opinion. Some other ones, I don't know. I mean, I never bowed as a ballerina, and it was, wasn't my thing to really throw the point shoes on, except I did once in a Ratmansky ballet. But bowing as Odette, Odile, Keytree, like that was, I was a little surprised at how, I don't know, maybe easily I could manifest the ballerina in me.
You're a gorgeous Odette. I love that one.
And then as well, like the whole flower thing, like, I don't know, let's talk about the flower thing for a second, because there's such protocol for flowers in each theater around the world and how things are presented. ABT has their own like protocol for flowers. Men don't get flowers at ABT. They somehow think it's emasculating. At Bolshoi Theater, you get, covered in bouquets of flowers. I mean, as many as you get sent to stage door, they bring on the stage. So much so that there was a clip of a bow where like it was like bouquet overload or something. And like, there's so many flowers specifically for the ballerina that they gesture to the usher to like put them on the floor of the stage, and then they step over them because there's just a mound of roses. And same goes for the guys. I mean, if guys get flowers, they'll give them to you on stage. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a beautiful tradition of the art form, I find.
Yeah, I liked the moments that there was some humor in this piece as well, like the stepping over the roses, or these moments that are also just as choreographed, and it's part of the protocol, but it's also, something that when you're miming it becomes a little absurd in a great way.
Yeah,
but also oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just don't forget your thought, but it's like when I danced shitty, like I remember, I mean, I had more shows than I care to admit where I knew that I didn't dance well, that I finished a variation, like I messed it up, or something didn't work, or which I didn't actually do in our piece, when I knew I was injured. Yeah, shit just got real.
Yeah. You had your own bow for when you're injured.
Yeah, a number of times where, like, I remember the first time I sprained my ankle on stage. I remember bowing at Bolshoi Theater for the broadcast. I had sprained my ankle. When my shoulder came out, I was bowing. Just like, and you have this look of like shock. I mean, like when I made my debut at Royal Ballet, I burst my calf, like I tore my calf. And I remember dancing and bowing, just being like, oh my God, my calf is torn. Like, and you just bow, you have to like go on autopilot. You can't show the audience, the real deal.
Yeah.
And, it's that look of like deer in headlights kind of thing.
And still trying to uphold the role and knowing that you have to get through it. And
like smoke and mirrors.
Completely. Yeah, well, I guess the bow and pain is one that we're gonna have to do in the sequel to this.
Yeah. Revisit.
And what I was going to say is that we're talking about these as protocols and these traditions, and in fact choreographies of how many steps, how you actually present the rose to the partner. It's all very specific and nuanced, but they're also not, from my experience, they're not taught when you're taught the choreography that you're going to be performing throughout the the ballet or the piece. But the bow is something that's kind of just passed down from seeing other people do this and having it kind of be transferred to you like via osmosis almost, or you inherit it. And I'm curious if you have any experience with, I didn't ask you this before, being taught the choreography of that specific role, or having to learn a new way of bowing for one of these roles, or is it really just from being around it for so long?
It's both. On the other hand, now that I'm an artistic director, I'm instilling a culture in the Australian ballet of like bowing, kind of, in my opinion, bowing properly. And I'm actually sort of rehearsing the principal dancers and those that do leading roles in how to really take in the audience, how to present themselves as a ballerina or as a male dancer. And, you know, it's a fine line. I think when bow has a lot of ego in it, it can get, and in Russia, it happens a lot. It can just get like enough already, like just get on with it, get off the stage. You know, Balanchine was so famous about saying like, make it fast, you know, like, and that's what I did in the video with New York City Ballet Bow, is just like bow and off, you know? And in Russia, like we would bow for like minutes, and the ballerina would leave, I'd stay on stage, they'd still be going like in unison. I'd come to the wing again and present her back out. And by the time we'd be going from pas de deux into the solos. Usually you're quite puffed to start the male solo from the pas de deux. It's a whole like issue of stamina. But in Russia, I was like so rested. Had caught my breath. I was like, because the bow just went on forever.
Yeah, you had a full rest.
Yeah, full rest. Anyway, I digress a bit, but like, you know, now I'm teaching artists here how to properly take in an audience, you know, how to like take your time, enjoy the moment, you know, breathe. If you've danced well, like people want to appreciate that. They want to show their appreciation with applause. If you didn't dance well, you know, pick it up a little bit. All that.
Yeah. And are they the same movements, or is it really about the energy that you're trying to train them with, you know, or they're practicing, you know, what the feeling is, or is it, you know, this is the step, this is how you do the B+, here's the actual choreography of what you should do for the Australian National Ballet, or
it's more, I think it's indicative of the role that they're dancing. So like a Don Q bow will be very different from a Balanchine bow. And I feel like I know the difference, so I can kind of coach them in how things should move along in the sense and the energy of the bow. But it's also, you know, here there's a tradition of applauding, giving applause to the orchestra, and we do that in the piece. And like everyone bows, the music director comes out, the conductor comes out, we bow, and then we go forward and we like present, the entire cast presents to the orchestra and gives them like a round of applause as well. And then we go back and we bow again. And I think that's really, really unique to the Australian culture, because it's really about the collective and like the collective effort. It's sort of the exact opposite of Russia. And so here it's like, it's a little more humble. It's a little more, you know, about like everyone coming together and having the show, other than just about like the ballerina. So I think it's really special that they applaud the orchestra.
Yeah, I was really touched by that, and I feel like that was a really beautiful moment in the video, or to learn. But this also reminds me that technically this video is kind of a collection of bows, these final bows for the stage, and different types of stages and different choreographers, but also different types of reverences, which is, you know, not technically a bow because he didn't just perform, but you just kind of, you practiced and trained with a instructor who at the very end of class, you do their specific choreographed reverence, which is a version of a bow, and wanted to see if you wanted to speak about some of those versions that we went through.
I mean, yeah, that's another tradition, you know, like in the ballet school that's so upheld, you know, in school, you actually start class with a reverence and you finish class with a reverence. And then if someone walks in that's of like superior rank, it sounds so like aristocratic, hierarchical, but
It's ballet.
It's ballet, Louis the 14th. You bow to them. So, you know, I was taught, I mean, I was taught like a reverence to the teacher, a reverence to the pianist, a reverence, you know, to the guest in the front of the room, whatever it is. And now when I walk into the Australian Ballet School down the hall to watch class, like they stop class, they do a reverence because I've walked in the room. It's very, I'm really adjusting to that. It's very strange. But I was on the other side. You know, I was the school
Right.
kid reverencing the artistic director of the company or whatever. So, you know, I mean, I think there's sort of a movement, right, to like break down traditions, to like, you know, I want to do like, let's reinvent, let's set up. But I do think that there are beautiful things in bows and reverences that the tradition, it's a beautiful tradition. You know,
It is, yeah.
It's something that's gorgeous about this art form, is that like there are certain traditions that have lasted and have stood the test of time.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found, I'm kind of leaping here, but uncanny about watching this footage and seeing these bows that had so much meaning, you know, that you were actually embodying these characters, and I didn't feel like you were acting. It was actually you becoming them and giving thanks to that moment, or just reliving those moments, was how bizarre it felt to have it be silent. And, you know, I kept on, you know, I've seen you do these bows before and seen, you know, with this massive applause and standing ovations and people actually throwing flowers, and to see it, it was almost like watching it in slow motion in a way for me. And was really, the silence was really palpable. And one of the things that I really struggled with when I first was editing the piece was, how do I, you know, what's the accompaniment? What kind of sound do I use for this? How do I, you know, play with the notion of an applause, and how's that going to work? And then very quickly realized that it needed to, that uncanny haunting silence needed to remain, because of the time and the context and where we were, and the fact that no one was giving bows to large audiences or even live audiences at all, and kept it that way. And I think because of that, it does allow for someone to see the articulation and these tiny little details between, you know, speaking of rank and hierarchy. I really love that you did, you know, the corps de ballet bows versus the soloist bows versus the principal dancer bows. And, you know, there's bows that you do all together as a group versus by yourself. And I feel like those are really specific as well. And the rules and protocols for that, which is a long way of me getting to some of my favorite bows for you, which is your signature bow, which is not something that everyone, you know, who performs gets to develop. It's more of a soloist principal role, because often if you're in the corps de ballet, you have to do exactly what the rest of the corps de ballet is doing. But I'm curious, you know, when you feel like your signature bow, which is towards the end of the video, kind of came into being, and where that came from, if it was from specific roles or really from you or from a mentor, or if you are on a, you know, if there's an origin story. I'm curious.
There isn't really, although I you know, I neglected to realize that like this would have come about because I'm taking solo bows. You know, I've taken solo bows throughout my entire career, and not everyone does that. And like in the corps de ballet and all that, it's interesting to realize, which I had never realized. So therefore I was given the opportunity, like you said, to sort of come up with my own sort of bow in a way, although I don't think my bow was anything kind of signature in any way. I mean, because I did a Nureyev bow in the video.
Yeah,
And
that was a signature. Yeah.
People talk about Nuryev's bow. You know, people
Yeah.
like he would go from one side of the house to the other, like second balcony, just really slowly, just, you know, pan the audience. And, you know, there's no one like him. There's no ego like him.
Mhm.
So that takes, that in and of itself was like an iconic bow. And I felt like, you know, Nina Aniashvili, who was a dancer with Bolshoi and with ABT, she would like do jetés out to the curtain when they were doing the page bows. She would come out in lifts, like she would just like, it'd become like this insane circus and the audience would freak out. I mean, they'd love it. They'd be eating it up. But like, you know, I wasn't inventing lifts as I was bowing. I wasn't, you know, like
Right.
I wasn't scanning the house. But, you know, I think in any bow, you want to connect to the audience in a way. And especially when they keep going on and on, like in Russia, you know, you'd get, I don't know, you'd go on for like 45 minutes. You do like 20 curtain calls and they'd be like again, and people would just stay, you know? And by the time you're in your like 12th curtain call, you're kind of out of character at that stage.
Right.
And you're just looking at the house and the house lights are up, you can see people and you're like looking up there, you're looking there, you're like thanking them, you're like, you know, bowing. So it becomes more human, which I think is a great moment to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Should we take some questions?
Yeah, hi, I'm back to bring some questions from the audience. Everyone has loved the piece and I thought there's someone that is incredibly thankful for the two of you, saying, you know, it starts so beautiful, taking the viewer back to so many of David's great roles, but then turning comical and making me laugh out loud. How did the comedic aspect come to you? Or was it always part of the vision of your vision for the film? And this is kind of connected to something that I was asking you earlier, you know, like how much of this was, you know, pre-prepared and planned? How much came up in the room with you two collaborating?
I think things really snowballed very quickly with us in the room, and it was really fun to just build these lists. And I think we were kind of overloaded with bows that we had to create these categories. So, you know, some were character roles from ballets, and then we had specific ballet companies from all around the world, you know, and, you know, Broadway versus a contemporary company versus a classical versus a Russian trained. And so we had specific choreographers, and then types of theaters, like a black box versus a city center versus a, you know, these different sizes and how that affects your body and your body language. And then these very personal bows, like one where you're, you know, returning from injury, or at the very end, we created a bow for the future, and you created your own bow. So it was, you know, after accumulating these categories, I was left with so much footage. I mean, it was, I don't know if it was comical when we were shooting it. I think it was very, for me, moving. And I think some of the comedy or the comic aspects happened during just putting things in contrast with each other. And, you know, all of a sudden something that is could be viewed that could appear very subtle looks like a caricature of itself just because it's next to something that is subtle. So some of the juxtaposition for me in the editing process, I think enhanced some of those moments. But I'm curious, David, what you felt about some of these roles that are truly caricatures and, you know, very performative.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly like the characters like von Rothbard or Dr. Coppelius, or, you know, where they're hunched over, they've got a walking stick, whatever. But on the other hand, like what we laughed about was like when we found those, like seeing mom in the audience, or catching a rose, or like dancing shitty, or you know, dancing like you've nailed it. those were the funny ones to me, because it was like, oh yeah, wait, I've never thought about this. Like that's mom, or that's when I danced really poorly, or, you know, I thought that was, to me, that was the humor in it.
Absolutely. And Madeline, I just want to mention for everyone that I don't know if they know that you are a former dancer too. That's a lot of where this comes from. So someone in the audience is also asking, did this all come from like your own experience and memory of witnessing these ballets or dancing them, of course, or was there specific footage that what you were getting inspired by?
Yeah. I've always paid attention and really loved the different choreographies from, you know, taking class all over the world and being able to, you know, take any ballet class anywhere and then all of a sudden have to learn the reverence for that particular instructor. And I've always thought that was really beautiful. And my background is in ballet, but I have a much my career, I was doing mostly Balanchine work. So I didn't know all of these other roles and all these different companies. So I feel like I had a fraction of the amount of knowledge that David had to give for this project. But to go back a little further, I've been doing this project called Gesture Archive it's an ongoing kind of database I've been building for over 15 years, where I'm collecting gestures and movements and poses that I find particularly relevant to a specific time or place or a technology, and capturing them as these little short videos that I then use when I'm choreographing a piece and looking for inspiration and context. So everything from, you know, how someone would open a phone or send a text message, or really looking at the evolution of our corporeal vocabularies over the course of the past like 20 years. And, you know, due to the influx of new technology, the, you know, new interfaces like this one, different, you know, it's really coming from anywhere. So it's really been an explorative process for me. And that's really, that's a huge part of my practice as an artist. And I think that that was very much inspired by being a professional ballet dancer and my training, and being able to tour and kind of understanding how different these nuances are from place to place and role to role, and being really fascinated by that. So that was kind of the seedling behind it, where it's very, I have a lot of projects where I'm like, I'm going to accumulate 100 different versions of this one particular move and then have it at hand. So it was, it definitely fit within my practice in that way.
And something that you both mentioned at the beginning that was really moving, I hadn't thought about it like that, is bows as a thank you. And because of how language, you know, the role that language plays in your work, Madeline, I was wondering, like, I was thinking as you were talking, you know, like, is this kind of a love letter to audiences in a way too? And I just wanted to put out the provocation to hear you both speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more than a thank you. And I think it's, you know, it's like a full-bodied, full stage, full theatered thank you. And I don't even know if thank you is the right word, because it's so multidimensional. And in a way, I do feel like the word reverence nails it a little bit more than thank you, because there's more kind of, there's more honor, and it's a little bit more sacred or profound, which I do see and feel in these vows. That is pretty inexplicable. And I don't know if it's a thing. I mean, for me, because of the time and the context of making this film, I do see this piece more as a requiem, or kind of a memorial to these moments that were actually missed, that were scheduled, these roles that were not, you know, performed, and kind of felt this palpable, like, you know, negative space of these empty theaters and the curtains being closed, and there's kind of a solemn, I wouldn't say, you know, darkness to that and the reality of the situation. So for me, that was a little bit where it was, or where I feel like it's settled, but at the same time, it's a kind of homage to these different peoples and these institutions and these companies and these characters, and it's, you know, showing that they're going to live on. And, you know, at the end, we have David create a bow to the future, which is for me very hopeful, where he bows, he creates these, you've choreographed a bow where you are moving across the stage and you're bowing to each direction as you're moving. And I think finishing the piece with that gesture was, I guess, embodied the feeling of the entire piece for me.
I mean, for me, like, it's in the title. It's like 52 final bows. And, you know, a lot of people have said, even here, like, you know, you never got your final show, you never had your final bow. And lo and behold, like everyone, I had like a ton of stuff scheduled. I was, you know, doing final shows in Moscow, in London, in New York. I was bringing a show to New York, like from Australia. I was doing final shows in Australia. Like, all of that wiped out, which, to be honest, everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt farewell performances were funereal. And it was like the death of the dancer in a way. And everyone views it differently. And like, for instance, Maria Kurowski at New York City Ballet is about to do her final show on Sunday, which I so wish I was there for. She's a dear friend and she deserves this celebration, which will be. But for me, I always was like there's more to do in life. Like, I'm really happy in a way that I didn't have that like somber, like goodbye, the curtain closes, you know. I've kind of had to shapeshift, like become a director in this insane time, and life goes on. And I, you know, I was this dancer around the world, and I did all these amazing things and went to these places that like I never even imagined I'd go to. But like, life marches on, thank God, you know. And I really always, even in my 20s, wanted to be conscious of the end of the athletic career, because you are essentially an athlete in a way, and
completely
how life would continue, you know. And so thanks for giving me that closure, Madeline.
Anytime. Well, that's the thing. There was no closure. And that's what I really like about the pieces. That's what I feel like we talked about when we were shooting is, you know, that was the beginning. It's not the end of being, you know, in the dance world and this period. There's no final, nothing about it is final. It is the beginning of this next chapter that is going to be, you know, very much in that world. It's, you know, you're a director, you're leading all these new students in the company towards learning these roles. You're teaching them the bows right now. So in a way, you're just, it's kind of it's a perpetual, it's definitely a beginning. And I think reviewing these roles and these experiences that you have done all around the world and have witnessed through friends and colleagues and choreographers is a really great way of honoring that. But it was very much almost the opposite of an ending. And it was really like, here's, you know, on to the next. And that's where those last, you know, those last bows where you're spinning off the stage, continuing to bow and, you know, creating something new, felt really meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And these roles are going to re-enter the stage again. You know, it's, you know, we're in the pandemic still. It was called, one of the details, I think I chose 52 bows because it was a year into the pandemic when we shot that. And I chose a bow per week. So it was 52 weeks in a year. And that seemed like a good number. And now we're, you know, so beyond that and still very much in it. And yeah, it's definitely, it continues, I guess. And these roles are going to be returning to the stage.
And on that note, I wanted to ask one last question, you know, because both of you, as you say, like you're only in the beginning of, you know, what's next. And, but what are the changes you see in the ballet world, and what are the changes in your personal lives that this pandemic has brought? And what are these lessons learned that you think are gonna kind of stay in the future?
I mean, I think one thing I hope for is that we have learned to like that that art is and performance is vital to life because we've been robbed of it. And the other is that we can't move forward if we go back to what it used to be. Like we can't charge forward if we don't continue to take risks and see things with fresh eyes. Because and this is as a director, like I have to view this art form and be like, okay, what's happening now? Like what's refreshed? What's in the future? And I think that's something that I really hope for, is that like this ballet is a dance is vital to artistic life, artistic, you know, the artistic, I don't know, culture, but we need to keep pushing forward and not feel like, oh, we now need to play it safe because we've lost so much money and we need to get audiences back, and we like, let's just, you know, charge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And on that note, just continuing the practice of, you know, adapting to new events and new pandemics and new problems and solutions every single day, and, you know, not trying to go back to these forms of presentation and performance. And I mean, there's no, you know, we're never going to try and go back to normal, but just to kind of be in a state of knowing that this could be the last performance or the last audience, and really having, you know, a sense of gratitude through all those moments that you are able to perform and be with a community of artists, and know that you're going to have to just continuously sculpt and resculpt what those venues and platforms and works are going to look like into the future, and that, you know, it doesn't always have to take the same form to be meaningful. And yeah, I think also I really hope that these notions of reverence and in honoring your mentors and your teachers and your audiences is taken, or is just, you know, no one really takes this for, I hope we all don't take this for granted as we move forward after this period, and know how much we all missed it.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for your generosity of here and sharing your thoughts with everyone. I certainly don't take for granted, you know, getting to work with people like you, seriously, and to get to share your work. It's such an honor. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone who joined. And this will be recorded and will be on our website. So if anyone missed it, just send them to our website soon and you will get to see it. So
thank you, Solana.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Madeline.
Bye.
Take care.
You too. Bye.